Good afternoon. Welcome to an Ageless interview. I am here with Clarice D. Aiello, and we're excited to have her here today. A little bit about Clarice. She's worked her way through several universities, doing a lot of postdoctoral work at places such as UC Berkeley, Stanford, and also holds a PhD from MIT. And she's currently working at the UCLA quantum biology lab known as Qubit. And she's doing some interesting work and looking really at the intersection of quantum and biology. And it's a topic that's been very interesting for me for a long time. I think this is really a futuristic field that has a lot of promise. And I think that it's going to be accelerating over time, and we're going to see more and more interest. So thanks a lot, Clarice, for taking the time today. We'll kind of jump right into sort of a Q&A, and maybe just to start, give us kind of like a little overview of in kind of simple terms, like what is quantum biology from your view?
Well, first of all, Jason, thank you for having me here. I'm excited to share with the world what quantum biology is. Another hat that I wear is I'm also director of the first US-based quantum biology center that has support from several foundations to do community building in this field. So I love to talk about quantum biology. And quantum biology is the emerging field that studies endogenous quantum degrees of freedom in nature. So you might have heard that when things get very, very small, the laws of Newtonian physics that we learn in high school, they start breaking down, and a new set of laws called quantum mechanics kick in, right? So when we're talking about, say, single electrons in proteins or single photons, so there is a whole different way that makes more sense for those things to be described at those very tiny length scales. So everything that we know of is composed of those tiny quantum objects. So everything is composed of atoms. But when a lot of quantum objects come together, they sort of influence each other in a disorganized way. And this disorganized interaction is what makes like the big world that we live in a classical world. That is a world where such delicate quantum phenomena do not matter in our daily lives, except that apparently those tiny little delicate quantum phenomena apparently are making are influencing our physiological function in a big way, and that's
Absolutely.
what quantum biology studies.
Absolutely, that was well said. It's interesting. I mean, even thinking about like quantum physics, I remember learning, or really like when I first came exposed to that field, it was like the Schrödinger cat, Schrödinger's cat, and sort of this concept or this thought process where it's like you have a cat, you put it in a box, you close the box. Now, before I open the box and view the cat, it's both dead and alive simultaneously, and it seems it's just kind of amazing that in our reality we would think that it has to have a distinct characteristic, whether it's alive or dead. But do you see that as true, that it is literally both of those states simultaneously?
So this is a thought experiment.
Mm-hmm.
This would never happen with a cat in real life, because a cat is a big object, and the atoms in the cat, they interact with each other to make the cat classical. But such phenomena being, say, in two places at the same time, or in two energy states at the same time, like say for an electron, an atom, this is at work every day for inanimate and animate things. It seems that those even if we cannot in real life think about the Schrödinger cat that is dead and alive, there are many instances, either like made on purpose or that just happen, where those quantum laws are at play. For example, there are people at the University of Vienna who have been researching interference effects in big proteins. That is, the protein behaves like a wave. Like, you know, when you have waves, water waves in a pond, for example, that there are interferences, right? The water wave sort of, there are places where the wave is very high and places where the wave is very low.
Sure.
The same type of interference has now been shown for like proteins, like, which are relatively big compounds. So those things exist. It's not at the level of the cat chat, or at any level relevant for Star Trek fans, but I mean, things are going in the direction of the control of quantum mechanical degrees of freedom in living things.
Gotcha. It completely makes sense. So it's sort of, you have a protein, and it's being influenced by quantum phenomena, where you could, the electron or the particle could be in one area and then disappear and then show up in another. It's very interesting. And I wonder, as we, gain more engineering capability, if we could then eventually manipulate those things, from like an aging standpoint, because we're always thinking about how do we slow down our aging, how do we improve our health. So like, what any thoughts from your experience on, like, I know it's a little bit of a new field on some levels, quantum biology, but in terms of like its relation to aging, any theories on what maybe could be true, or some discoveries that maybe haven't quite fully been thought out, but we may realize later that something we're doing in our lives, we could be doing differently because of these discoveries, if that makes sense.
I don't know about doing things differently.
Mm-hmm.
What I know is that I do believe that, again, not tomorrow, but maybe in 25 years, maybe we can start trying to drive quantum phenomena in biology towards longevity and towards physiological regulation. For example, and I travel with my spins. Let me get them. So I study a particular quantum property of electrons called spin. Spin is usually represented with an arrow, and spin is a quantum property that is as fundamental as mass and charge, but it does not have a classical equivalent. And electrons have spin. Spins can be represented with an arrow pointing up or down, and this just means two different energy levels of this quantum property called spin. It's just on and off, or some other thing that you can think
up or down, on or off.
Up or down, yeah.
Makes sense.
It turns out that it's known from basic chemistry that there are some chemical reactions that depend on spin. Here's how it goes. This is absolutely known. The chemical reaction is happening, and then it comes to a crossroads. And at that crossroads, the chemical reaction looks for the quantum state of the spin. If the spin is up, has a certain energy, the electron spin property has a certain value, the chemical reaction continues through one branch. If the electron spin is down, the chemical reaction continues through another branch. Importantly, the two branches yield different macroscopic final products. So depending on the state, the quantum state, quantum property of the electron, you get two very different final products. It turns out that spins interact with magnetic fields. This means that by applying magnetic fields, you can actually alter the spin state. So if you apply a magnetic field onto this particular spin at the point where the chemical reaction comes to a crossroads, you can actually influence if the chemical reaction comes through here or through here. A brief interaction with a magnetic field can have macroscopic consequences and at much longer time scales, because it all happens downstream. So the first people to think about this in a biology context were people who were interested in birds, because when birds migrate, they do so following the magnetic field of the Earth, which is weaker than the magnetic field that you sense when you put your cell phone close to your face. And the only standing hypothesis on how they do so is this sort of spin-dependent chemical reaction. Birds and organisms in general would feel magnetic fields to the extent that they would feel different physiological concentrations of products coming from these spin-dependent chemical reactions. But this is way broader than birds. There's a correlative evidence now that many metabolic processes, such as, let me list, stem cell regeneration rates, glycolysis rates, cellular respiration rates, extracellular acidification rates, cellular autofluorescence, epigenetic changes, embryogenesis, all those calcium signaling, all those things have been shown to depend on weak magnetic fields in a way that is consistent with a quantum theory, like under the hood, like the hood.
Gotcha. No, that's actually
everything.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking of like you could apply that to like developing a certain type of drug. If you could, you know.
Well, it is a different type of drug in that it's an electromagnetic drug.
Right.
It's thinking about things electromagnetically instead of chemically, right? It's like so there's a class of proteins that are sensitive to magnetic fields that can sustain these spin-dependent chemical reactions. And it turns out that each one is sensitive to a different combination of parameters of magnetic field strength, frequency, and direction. So in 25 years, here's where I want to get. In 25 years, the end point is a crappy endpoint, is already achievable with current technology. In 25 years, I want to have my phone turn on an app and say, well, I need help with wound healing. And then the app will provide me with a certain magnetic field strength, frequency, and direction. And you just put it here and try to influence the chemical reaction.
Okay.
What will take 25 years to get there? That's the important part. The end goal is crappy and achievable already. The complicated part that's going to take us 25 years, a lot of high-tech quantum instrumentation, is getting to the code book, is getting to the atlas, is doing quantum-inspired high-tech experiments to understand exactly what magnetic field parameters you need to change this chemical reaction deterministically, or what other magnetic field parameters you need to change that. Once we have this code book, you have your app. But until we get there, there needs to be some sort of heavy investment in this bottleneck, which is the absence of a quantum experiment, right? So because like in solution, there's no whatsoever doubt that those proteins are behaving as quantum objects. These electrons are behaving as quantum objects. But the next level of evidence occurs with like birds or flies or plates of thousands of cells. So we are starting to bridge here in my lab those two length scales. We want to start doing quantum inspired experiments, first inside single cells and then like maybe 2 cells, maybe at some point tissue level. So we want to build this knowledge up from the ground up.
Interesting. That's very fascinating. I mean, thinking about like that end goal of say having a device as big as your phone and then putting it to your wound and then it would have a magnetic field, right? Based on say some new discoveries. That magnetic field would then influence your biology and heal your wound faster than it would normally. Do I understand that correctly? Be faster or better?
Yes. Or faster or better. We do not know, right? or both. We do not know. There is so much that can be exploited for electromagnetics in biology. That's what it is. Like 95% of quantum biology is just electromagnetics in biology.
Magnetics, yes, totally.
Electromagnetics.
Electromagnetics.
It's applying, yes.
Okay. And it sounds like even though we don't necessarily know the complete picture, it sounds like what we do know is that it's possible, right? We know that. It sounds like from the way I'm understanding.
It is, but if like in my shoes, I see this as a catch-22, because high-tech energy is needed, and people will not accept the low-tech evidence, which is correlational, right? For example, beautiful paper showing that if people did it with coils and just by approaching a phone to a cell culture, and they showed that like changes in macroscopic calcium signaling. This is super cool. This is another correlative evidence that there might be something to electromagnetics in biology. But then I put this as preliminary evidence in my grants, and people say, well, but the data is low tech, it's crappy, they use the cell phone. And then I'm like, well, give me the money to build the quantum experiments. But then they're like, so it's a big catch-22, and there needs to be a shift into how we think about those things, and like what sort of technology we start throwing at biology, right? I'm proposing to start treating biological degrees of freedom like as bona fide quantum degrees of freedom, right? Quantum knobs that you need to learn how to deterministically control, and you need high tech for that doesn't currently exist.
Absolutely. No, it makes sense. We're obviously not there. I do think it kind of, I was thinking back to like when we were at Foresight, that biotech, and the undervalued area of aging, and all the presentations were under definitely good talks. I actually thought this one as well, definitely being sort of an area that has a lot of potential that I don't think our society, especially governments, that are way far behind, they're not seeing, aging as a big of a problem, and they're not seeing fields like quantum biology. They don't really see the potential upside. And that's kind of what I think you've alluded to, is that the upside's huge. If we can figure this stuff out, we're talking about technologies and different tools that are going to be so futuristic.
And I truly believe, again, I'm very partial. I grew up in the field of quantum computing and quantum sensing. I think quantum biology is today where quantum computing was like 30 years ago, right? There was a lot of theory, some experiments, and then people started putting things together, and now it's blossomed in this very big industry after 30 years, right? It took some investment from visionaries to know that this wasn't going to happen overnight. This quantum biology is not going to happen overnight, but we need to start thinking about this as soon as possible to be able to harness its potential during our lifetime, right?
100%. We need more people, more capital, more knowledge in the space. And because I feel like also there is an interrelation with nanotechnology. I feel like, quantum biology and nanotechnology, I feel like these are going to go hand in hand, right?
I totally think so. And again, biophysics so far has been, if you're talking about physics and biology, there's a lot of people, again, talking about mechanobiology, like Newton's laws, what happens with Polka cell. So this is Maxwell's equations in biology. It's the interaction of biology with electromagnetic fields. If there's a physicist in the audience, I would describe it as light-matter interaction, where matter is biomatter, right? It's thinking about other ways of actuating change in biological matter.
Exactly. That, 100%. Yeah, figuring out how to make, I feel like to drive, so like, we've heard about these futuristic nano robots and these things that we haven't quite been able to develop. And I think that one of the things is like just getting those to eventually move around, and maybe, with this concept where these like electromagnetic fields can influence biology or maybe even, chemical processes or even like small scale hardware. that may be a way to get them to kind of move, like, okay, go from point A to point B, do this task.
Yeah.
You think that could be maybe a method there? Or?
I think so. And I also think that, if nature is using quantum mechanics to function, it has had a long time to optimize its functioning, right? So I think that we might even learn with nature how to build better technologies and even better quantum technologies. I'm not saying, well, let's replace Google's beautiful quantum computer with a molecule, but are there strategies? So the reason why I say quantum computers don't exist today is because everything that starts quantum dies classical because of interactions with other quantum particles. That's why we live in this big classical world. And quantum computers are limited today because at some point they stop acting quantum. They start losing their quantumness. Okay.
Oh, really?
So if nature is exploiting quantumness, what's it doing to exploit? Like, how is it doing to keep the quantumness going for long enough for it to do its thing? I bet that there are strategies that nature is using to make systems live longer as quantum objects that we're not thinking about now. So I do believe that we can learn with nature how to build better quantum technologies. Yes.
100% agree. Yeah, it's anything in our reality, it's sort of like you find something that's already working and you kind of copy that, and then adapt it and make it a little better. And that's, something, even you think of a company like Apple, they probably saw phones, a few other companies were building them, they copied it, they added their own features. And I think this is going to be the same thing, just viewing what nature has built to some degree has gotten better and better, with all these microscopes now, a single microscope being millions of dollars with all these, features. And that is going to get better with time, just being able to view these things, and like the spin part, are we able to like view that on the computer? Like you could see, okay.
Yes, we are. So we actually use the same type of technique that is used in the context of a technological quantum sensing. So for example, in my PhD, I worked with a quantum sensor, which was an electronic spin in diamond. Okay. It was in particular a very good technological quantum sensor of magnetic fields. And this thing that lived in the material diamond at room temperature, it emitted light at a different intensity if that particular spin was up or down. This means that just by observing emitted fluorescent levels, we were able to do what's usually referred to in the field as quantum state readout. This is like a very common way of like measuring differences in fluorescence intensity, is a very common way of reading out the state of a quantum system. So it's very interesting that many of the proteins that can sustain such spin-dependent chemical reactions that we talked about, they also fluoresce at different intensities if the spin of interest is up or down. So just by tracking small differences in fluorescence intensity in those proteins, we can actually do the state readout. We can actually infer the quantum state of the electronic spin that we care about. And this is how we plan on building our microscopes. So our instruments are glorified microscopes with coils to give the magnetic field to mess up with the spin, but we want to be able to record the state of the spin as we mess up with it by reading these fluorescence differences.
Interesting. Yeah, it makes me think of a lot of the different technologies and kind of tools coming out today. Could be maybe altering something like on the quantum level, that we don't know exactly what it's
Absolutely.
changing yet, right?
Absolutely. For
Right.
example, the magnetic brain stimulation that
Yes.
people know that it alleviates symptoms, people prescribe it. People, as far as I understand, they don't have an in-depth understanding of how that works. Like I ask people, so what's the frequency of the magnetic field that you apply? How do you choose the frequency, the intensity? And they're like, well, we choose what works.
Like, we don't know, but we know it works, kind of. So
Exactly. So I am ready to bet that there are many of such phenomena that are being employed in therapeutics, more or less, starting to gain the mainstream, that might be somehow related. So again, correlative evidence for electromagnetics having an effect in biology has existed for like 50 years.
yes, no, it totally makes sense. And I mean, it reminds me, I was taking this course at Stanford and on longevity, and they were saying about like we were just always emphasize how we really only know the tip of the iceberg in all these fields, and as much as we've discovered through the years, and so much knowledge, but we're still really just so much more to learn, so many unknowns. Something I've been doing is like called a red light therapy, just kind of running an experiment on myself. And, the red light hits my skin. And I think the idea is that it affects like the mitochondria, which is, one of the organelles that we're most interested in, hence the little logo here. Being, this concept of, I'm forgetting the name now, biogenesis, essentially like where it's altering the mitochondria. And I'm wondering now if it's like these electromagnetic fields coming from the light that then does something that we don't really know exactly what it's doing, but it could be having an effect. And
I,
um,
I, I find photobiology very interesting and understudied too, right? So phototherapies. I have a friend, so I'm from Brazil. I have a friend in Brazil who has like a whole company only on photobiology, super well funded now. And again,
nice.
they can predict doses and things, but they cannot understand yet why the particular red light or why the dose or what exactly is happening at the molecular level to deterministic extent. I find it super interesting, right? So for mitochondria in particular, again, there have been some phenomena that have been found to be altered by magnetic fields in a way that is consistent with the spin model, such as cellular respiration rates, um, cellular uh, fluorescence from mitochondrial flavoproteins are magnetic field dependent in a way that is consistent with the spin model. So yes, if we talk, I think that mitochondria might be a good site to start looking for quantum effects in
To the
biology.
effects. Yeah, yeah. If you can view them. No, that makes sense. And yeah, it kind of it's interesting because that means that there could be something, these red lights or near infrared, that is really altering, maybe even I almost think of it's like this is like a first version of that device you were describing at the beginning where it would heal, but this one is just like version one, then it doesn't work that great. You barely, you kind of notice it maybe, or you don't. But then, on version 10, I think less than 25 years from now, but we'll see, a long time from now, it'll actually, heal you
Yeah,
completely within who knows how fast. I mean, you know.
yeah. So what have you found in your own experiment with the red light?
I feel like I don't use it enough to really notice that much. There was a few times when I used it where I felt like a little, kind of like a head change. Like I felt like a
Interesting.
little boost in my sort of energy. It was strange, but
Interesting.
I feel like you really got to use it like consistently, like 10 to 20
Right.
minutes every day to get such a noticeable thing. And I need to do better. I do have it right here. But it has like 5 different wavelengths, near infrared, and then a bunch of wavelengths. And when you read the pamphlet, they make it sound like, oh, it does all this really great stuff.
Cool.
And
Well, I assure you, the science of that is not understood. The pamphlet might say whatever they want. I mean, it might be good for you, but I don't think that anyone in this planet knows like what exactly is going on, which is awesome
Yeah.
because that's exactly what we're interested in. I want to find out too.
Absolutely, absolutely. The unknowns that
Yeah.
those are going to be interesting, and so so this space. I mean, I feel like there's some companies maybe working on this stuff, but I feel like it is kind of a smaller area. Like it's definitely not like gene therapy or something, right? It's kind of just starting out. It feels like.
Yes, it's definitely just starting out, and uh, one of my goals is try to bring this field to the mainstream so that there's young talent going in. There are standard NSF, NIH calls for that, right? So
Absolutely.
yes,
No, well, that's
we need.
one of our goals, with Ageless Partners is to bring young people into the movement who really can see that aging is reversible and using these futuristic tools in these fields like quantum biology. So as we come across more people, we'll definitely send them your way.
Awesome, exciting.
Absolutely, absolutely. Cool. Well, our one or two last questions, and I will let you go. I know you got a lot of work there. Any thoughts on these more recent like quantum computers? I know it's not exactly a quantum biological system, but I know Google is making a lot of progress. I mean, can we use those to really? Can we leverage them to really solve some of these harder issues in quantum biology or in AI? Or what are your thoughts on that?
So I think that again in the future, quantum computers are going to be good as a finding a good drug target or things like this. I think quantum computers are the first thing that they're going to be useful for in the pharma space is going to be drug development somehow, right?
Okay.
Or like protein folding and stuff. Uh, it's regardless of what people sell, we're very far from that. We're again decade far from that happening, but I believe that's going to be like a super low hanging fruit on how quantum computers can help chemistry and the pharma industry in general.
That makes sense. Yeah, they could run simulations at much
Yeah,
faster.
exactly.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, awesome. Well, thanks, Clarice. Really appreciate all the insights and taking the time today. I thought it was phenomenal. Really, just a fascinating industry, and thanks for all the work you're putting in there.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, yeah. And if there's anything else we can do to help out, definitely reach out anytime.
I will for sure.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thank
Clarice.
you, Jit. Bye
Appreciate
bye.
it.
Take care. Bye.
Cheers.